booklet, I've left that space for a couple of pictures. This is just a little task. I feel very teachery at the moment. I want you to do this little diagram. And this diagram is 3 things, okay, that you think are in your 20%. The 3 things that if you improve, you will improve as a teacher. Okay, for me, I also think 3 cups of coffee a day does have a big impact. I don't think any of that. Huel said he had 2 espressos just before that speech, and you can kind of sense it. So what are the 3 areas? And your 3 might well be different to mine, and that's the right thing. Okay? And you might want to talk to your elbow partner. Sorry, I'm going to keep using it. Just a couple of minutes. Think about your 3 areas.
I'll just walk away and leave them alone.
Okay, can I draw people back? I know that's quite quick. It's a bit like you. There was no way we had enough time. Don't worry, I'm not going to demand that you tell me your 3. I'm going to ask Charlie. Charlie's not a teacher. Just make that clear. But we were just talking about, what things does he need to improve on? And do you want to
I put proofreading because I find that a lot of the time we make silly mistakes, like spelling or sort of dates or whatever.
And the other one?
I just IT.
Yeah. He couldn't think of 3. He's absolutely so good. I say, do you do any wider reading? Yeah, there's loads. It's interesting that he's done a specific subject, a topic, and then he's done a skill that kind of broadly, kind of looks around. And you might find yours is a bit like that. It's not as easy as kind of, will 3 teaching strategies fix anything? It might be a bit more complex. Not the next slide. It's conscious of timing. I will probably feedback yours. Here are my 3. Okay. And it's quite funny because if you'd have told me that when I was training, I'd have been a bit surprised. I thought, well, that's a bit basic. And that's, that's kind of simple. I kind of do all of those, don't I? It's kind of, that is teaching, isn't it? And that's exactly right. I don't think I reflected on my explanations until about 5 or 6 months ago. I read Daniel Willingham's book about, why students don't like school. And he was saying about memory and what they remember and, the processes of the brain and remembering explanations. And I thought, well, I do that. I've never thought of that. So I started to reflect a bit on my own explanations. And I started to video, self-obsessed, but video explanations, and start to break them down. You do, as an expert, after a few years, have a repertoire, as Huel was saying, but actually, something as simple seeming as that might be the area that you can improve. And if we really think about it, those 10 minutes, 5 minutes at the start of a lesson where we give an explanation is probably the most important section of any lesson. I know students interacting and learning and all that is really important, but we kind of know that if we don't get that explanation right, then everything else that follows will struggle a bit. Those are 3 of mine. You go on the next slide. As a department, we felt that feedback was our issue. So in our SALT time, we looked at feedback. It synced nicely with Ofsted and the whole bookmarking and everything else. We're English teachers, so that's the beast of burden that we carry. So we looked at feedback. On the next slide, we looked at written feedback. And what we did as a department is just hunt down as many ideas as we could. And on your second page of the booklet is that diagram. And I'll probably struggle to do it justice talking through all of them. But what we needed to do was to improve written feedback as English teachers. Otherwise, we didn't have the time, quite frankly, to improve ourselves as teachers. Okay? So we had to reduce the marking load to allow us to play on Twitter. No. We had to reduce the marking load to allow us to do the reading, to make those other little changes. A marking rota. Setting quite clearly marking rota for each class when they're going to come in, because there is nothing worse and nothing as that puts you off more than having a big pile of marking all at once. Okay, we are human beings. If we have that, then we will do every procrastination possible to move it. So having a rota helps, little and often. There was, I can't remember who it was on Twitter, but said that they mark 5 books during the day, every day, and by doing that, it just chips away at it, and it makes the weekend easier, and it makes the planning time a little bit easier, so they can deliberately practice. In-class feedback. One big thing is about improving the quality of as they're working, because that, if you mark their book and they get it back 2 weeks later, it's largely pointless anyway. Okay, synchronous, in-time feedback when the working is important. And if Ofsted want to see it, well then I can stamp it. Now, there's nothing worse than stamp oral feedback. I know teachers stamp that quite often, and that can be a cheat. But if you can stamp that oral feedback as they're all working, and then they can write down, spider off what you've said, what targeted feedback you've given them, they can then act on that, and then you can refer back to that. And that little detail makes that a very high-impact marking strategy, and you don't need to take all the books in to be able to do it. You can do it in the lesson, in that 10 minutes. And you can identify, have a little register. I'm going to look at certain students in this lesson. If Ofsted want to see the progress of X and Y, or a gifted student who we're all letting down in our state education system, well, you could target that in that one lesson, in that task. And targeted marking, not marking everything. Okay, I don't think Ofsted ever said mark everything. They didn't say mark every 5 lessons. Okay, our schools might have interpreted it in slightly different ways, but we shouldn't mark everything. Okay, if we're correcting every bit of literacy, then students will become passive and just let you do it, and it will be pointless. A rule of returning substandard work. Okay, of not allowing a rubbish piece of work that you will spend a lot of time giving feedback to say this isn't right, this isn't right. Having that standard set high saves you a lot of time in the long run. And it might be awkward. It is awkward sending back work and then remembering to get it in on time. But if you set the standard high, you actually save yourself a lot of time throughout the year. Dedicated dirt time. Okay, dirt time, it's Nick from Jackie Breer, dedicated improvement and reflection time. If you're giving all this written feedback and they don't have as much time as you took to write it, to reflect on it, it's pointless. Why are you doing it? Laminating assessment criteria and annotating. I haven't laminated anything for a while. I used to do it a lot. But after a couple of years of having an A-level, particularly where it worked well, is just laminating aspects of the AOs and the assessment objectives of that piece of work. And if they're well trained, they can move to doing it themselves. And it's these little marginal improvements in your marking. If you're doing 4 or 5 of those, all of those marginal gains will save you a lot of time. Okay, and time is precious. Self-assessment, then your assessment of their assessment. Does that make sense? Where they do a piece of work, they self-assess it, and you've got to scaffold that. Students can't self-assess and peer assess well without a lot of training, and you should invest that time to train them. But if you then assess that, you can write one comment, because they've done the job. Students are brilliantly accurate at assessing themselves, usually. And if they've written that, you can respond to that, and it will halve your time, often. And this isn't me just trying to cheat time. It's actually more effective because they're engaged in what they're writing. Invest time in well-trained peer assessment, student, self-assessment. I'm pretty sure we all understand the value of that. But there's some awful self-assessment and there's some high-quality self-assessment. I think you know the difference, and you have to invest that time. And then codes instead of comments. Little symbols. It's finding just those little marginal improvements. If I notice after marking 5 books there's one general pattern, okay, I will stop noting that pattern. I'll devise a symbol for it, and then I'll ask all the students, when I give them their books back, to all write the symbol down and then be looking for it. So I want them interacting. I want to save time, and I want them more active and more involved. So that written feedback has been a focus for our department. And each of us have practiced deliberately 1 or 2 things, and we've shared them, and we've watched each other do it. My deliberate practice, I'm going to skim this, I'm conscious of time, but I wanted to work in the last 3 months on explanations, because I felt it was a bit of a revelation. I slipped into that, I can be a comedian and I can make my Year 11s laugh, but am I making them remember what I say? And I started to focus on that. So on the next slide, this is a bit detailed, but to go back to that, what deliberate practices. So, what was my goal? Giving memorable, and that was the important bit, and effective explanations on aspects of narrative. So I wanted this for A-level. I picked my A-level lit class. I did it once a week, not in all my lessons, once a week. Okay, in the same room. I wanted that real specific so I could train my habits to do it. And then I've got a paired teacher, and she's quite young and fresh and kind of got new eyes on things, and I can get her in and she can watch me, and I don't feel in any way worried by that. It's not my boss watching me, and she can critically look at it, and it doesn't take a full lesson cover because we can arrange it for the first 15 minutes of the lesson. And then setting up a blog. So from September, we're going to set up a blog on Gothic literature. Okay? And that's going to be where I'm going to write my explanations up. So I feel like I've kept them. And I'm going to get students to feed back on what they remember. I'm going to test them to see if my explanations have worked. This might seem like a lot of work, but if you can target it and do it over a period of months, it isn't. But it will genuinely make that 20% high impact, 80% of hit all the rest of your lessons for hopefully years. Film myself twice a half term. I've got to make myself do it. I've got to get myself a schedule and a routine because it's so easy to just not do it. Okay? I've got 100 other things I can think of and I can just teach good lessons anyway. But I want to teach brilliant lessons. So I've got to make myself do it. And then repeat. And then refine it. And then ask subject leader, well, I am subject leader, so I'll ask someone else, like my subject leader of media studies. And it won't be in main PD. It will be for me. And I will seize my own CPD and I will make myself better. Because probably no one in the school will be looking at explanations, but I want to and I need to for me. This is a point where we're just going to go now, actually. So just go. And you don't have to set any tags. No, but what I would want you to go away with, and there's one little mini task on this, if you go back to that front cover, is if you were to identify one thing that, when you've got a little bit of time now, because you have in the end of this term, we all have, we know it, that little bit of game time. And then, if you're a primary, you haven't. Sorry. My sister's a primary deputy, I know. But then, in that first term, if you can focus on one area, and then, and it doesn't have to be on that list, because it has to be yours, and you're the only person who knows it, and your boss probably doesn't even know it, because you're the only one who gets the genuine knowledge of all of your lessons. Those lessons where no one's watching, and you're glad no one's watching. The next one. There are barriers. The fear of it, the negative emotion of failing and doing badly. This success is like that squiggly line. It goes badly lots of times. Okay? Time, that's a negative one. It takes time to do this, but if we're committed to being brilliant, call it outstanding. I don't want to call it outstanding, I want to call it brilliant instead. Then you've got to take some time and focus your time, gain it, nick it from marking. Then lastly, we've got bad habits. She's got bad habits, but she's lived through it. We need to organise ourselves beyond our bad habits. Lastly, this is the one kind of go-away thing before I get told off for sending you back late. This is someone who's learning the violin. 100 numbers in circles. Every day they practice the violin, they're going to tick off a circle. If you were to find your one target and create your own diagram, not 100, that's too many, but you were to create your own diagram, maybe it was written feedback and you created a W of circles, and maybe you had 25 circles, and you made yourself tick that. Maybe it's at the front of your planner. That was a good way of making you do stuff, at the front of your planner. And you deliberately practice that one thing, and then you constantly reflected on it. Then it might be that that one small thing is an improvement that maybe only you know, but you will know that that impact will have over the next 6 months, the next 6 years, we're going to be working until we're about 78 of this for the next 40 years maybe. So just focusing in, deliberate practice. Okay, thank you. I wish Charlie, go round for Charlie. Charlie's going to take us back, and you're all going to blame me for being slightly late.